They say love is blind, but I realized I was just being kept in the dark. For years, I lived in what I thought was a masterpiece of a relationship. He was devoted, the kind of partner who remembered every anniversary and held me when I cried. But then, the seeds of doubt started to sprout. A hushed phone call, a lie about a late night at work, a flicker of coldness in his eyes when he thought I wasn't looking. I knew something was deeply wrong, but I needed the truth, not his excuses. So, I decided to play a dangerous game. I faked amnesia. They say the most dangerous place to be is inside a dream you haven't woken up from yet. My dream was named Julian. If you saw us 3 years ago, you would have been jealous. I couldn't believe a man like him, polished, attentive, seemingly carved out of pure devotion, had chosen me. Our house was a sanctuary of fresh lilies and soft lighting, a place where the outside world felt like a distant memory. He was the man who caught me whenever I tripped. Literally, if I stumbled on a rug, his hand was there on my waist before I even felt the gravity pull. He tucked my hair behind my ear with a gentleness that felt like a vow. I want you to picture our engagement. It was a sunset in Santorini, the sky bleeding into shades of violet and gold. He got down on one knee, his voice trembling as he told me I was his entire world. At the time, I thought it was the most romantic thing I'd ever heard. Looking back, I realize, world, was just another word for property. The shift wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow, chilling consistency. It started with the corrections. We would be out with friends, and I'd recount a funny story about a trip we took. Julian would chuckle, pat my hand, and say, "No, honey, you're remembering it wrong. We stayed at the Hilton, not the boutique hotel. Your memory has been so fuzzy lately." He said it with such warmth that everyone at the table looked at me with pity, and I started to look at myself with doubt. Then came the isolation, disguised as protection. He told me my best friend was talking behind my back. He told me my mother was becoming too much to handle, and that he would manage the phone calls so I wouldn't get stressed. He was building a wall around me, brick by brick, and painting the bricks to look like roses. I remember the night the gold leaf finally started to peel. I found a receipt in his coat pocket for a jewelry store, not for a necklace I owned, but for a diamond bracelet I'd never seen. When I asked him about it, he didn't blink. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "I gave that to you for your birthday, Sarah. Don't tell me you lost it already. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're losing your grip." He said it so convincingly that for a moment, I actually checked my jewelry box. I searched the house for hours, crying, gasping for air, wondering if I was developing early onset dementia. I wasn't losing my mind. I was losing my safety. He wasn't catching me when I tripped anymore. He was the one sticking his foot out to make sure I fell. The red flags became a blinding crimson. I saw the way his phone lit up at 3 in the morning. I saw the way our joint savings account was being bled dry in increments too small to trigger an alert, but too steady to be an accident. He was preparing for a life without me, while convincing me I couldn't live without him. He was gaslighting me into a state of total dependency so that when he finally left, or when he finally took everything, I wouldn't have the mental strength to fight back. One Tuesday evening, I sat in our beautiful, flower-filled living room and watched him walk through the door. He kissed my forehead and asked if I'd taken my vitamins, the ones he insisted I take for my memory issues. I looked at the man I had loved and realized he was a stranger wearing a familiar face. He was a predator who had built a cage out of "I love yous." I realized that as long as I was Sarah, the girl who was confused and fragile, he would keep winning. He knew every move I would make because he was the one writing the script of my life. To stop a master manipulator, you have to stop being the person they think they are manipulating. You have to become a variable they didn't calculate. That night, as I lay in bed next to him, listening to his steady, rhythmic breathing, I made a choice. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to confront him and let him twist my words until I was apologizing for his cheating. I was going to disappear while standing right in front of him. The idea took root in the silence. If Julian wanted a version of me that was broken, a version that couldn't remember the truth, I would give him exactly that. But I would do it on my terms. I would become a blank slate. I would watch him from behind a mask of vacancy and let him tell his lies until he tripped over them. Tomorrow, I would have the accident. Tomorrow, the flowers in this house would stay, but the girl who believed in them would be gone. When the sun rose, I would wake up and look at the man who stole my life, and I would ask him the only question that could set me free. Who are you? I decided that tomorrow, I wouldn't remember a single thing. And that was the first day of my revenge. Most people use amnesia to forget the past. I used it to watch my future be stolen in real time. If you've ever felt that cold shiver down your spine, the one that tells you your perfect partner is a stranger, hit that like button. It's the only way I'll know I wasn't the only one living a double life. Subscribe now, because the deeper this rabbit hole goes, the more you're going to need to see how I climbed back out. Let's see if you can spot the lie before I did. The hospital room was a vacuum of white noise and sterilized air. The sharp, clinical scent of bleach stung my nostrils, a stark contrast to the lilies that used to fill our home. I lay there, my head wrapped in gauze, watching the door. This was the threshold. Once I crossed it, there was no turning back. I had to be perfect. When the door finally pushed open, Julian entered. He didn't rush to me with the heat of a man who almost lost his soulmate. Instead, he hesitated. In that split second of silence, I saw it. The flicker of terror in his eyes. It wasn't the fear of a grieving partner. It was the panicked calculation of a man wondering if his secrets had died in the crash or if they were about to be shouted from the rooftops. I let my gaze go soft and unfocused. I looked through him, past him, as if he were nothing more than a ghost in the room. When he finally reached the edge of my bed and reached for my hand, I pulled away. Not with anger, but with the hollow curiosity of a child. I let the silence hang until it became unbearable. Then, I whispered the 3 words that would dismantle his world. Who are you? The transformation was instant. Julian crumbled. He fell to his knees, burying his face in the scratchy hospital sheets, his shoulders shaking with what looked like devastating sobs. It was an Oscar-winning performance. If I hadn't seen that flash of guilt at the door, I might have believed him. He stayed there for an hour, weeping about the tragedy of us, while I watched him from behind my mask of vacancy. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was an observer, recording every fake tremor in his voice. The doctors called it a miracle that I was physically intact, but the retrograde amnesia was a mystery they couldn't solve. Julian stepped up as the hero of the story. He handled the paperwork, the discharge, and the hushed conversations with the nurses. He was the devoted saint, the man whose wife had forgotten his very existence but who vowed to stay by her side until the end. Within a week, I was back in the house of flowers and lies. But this time, I was the one holding the cards. The re-education began almost immediately. He moved me back into our bedroom, but it felt like being checked into a high-end prison. Every morning, he would sit at the edge of the bed with a tray of breakfast and a photo album. This was the chilling comfort of a predator. He didn't just want to help me remember, he wanted to rewrite my history. He started small, telling me stories about how we met. In his version, he was the savior who plucked me from a life of mediocrity. He told me that before the accident, I was difficult. He used that word often, letting it hang in the air like a threat. You were so unhappy, Sarah, he'd say, stroking my hand with a touch that made my skin crawl. You struggled with your temper. You pushed everyone away. I was the only one who could handle you. I sat there, nodding blankly, playing the role of the grateful invalid. Inside, I was screaming. He was gaslighting a woman he thought couldn't fight back. He told me that my friends hadn't called because they were tired of my drama. He told me that I had asked him to take over my finances because the stress of managing money made me unstable. Each lie was a brick in a new wall, one designed to keep me isolated and entirely dependent on his mercy. I watched him through the eyes of a stranger, and it was the most enlightening experience of my life. When you stop looking at someone through the lens of love, the truth becomes blinding. Without the rose-colored glasses, I saw the micro-expressions he usually hid behind his charming smile. I saw the flash of disgust when I, accidentally, spilled water on the table. I saw the way his jaw tightened when I asked too many questions about our bank accounts. I saw the way he looked at his watch when he thought I was napping, his face shifting from grieving husband to bored businessman the second he thought the audience was gone. He would spend hours telling me how lucky I was that he stayed. He painted a picture of a man who was a martyr for love. Most men would have walked away, he whispered one night, the room dark except for the glow of the hallway light. But I'm here. I'm the only one who will ever truly love you, Sarah. Remember that. It was a terrifyingly intimate form of psychological warfare. He was trying to make me fall in love with my captor. He wanted me to believe that my identity was a burden and that he was the only one willing to carry it. He was comfortable now. The amnesia had given him a blank check, and he was cashing it in every single day. He started taking business calls in the room with me, thinking I was too far gone to process the jargon. I heard names of offshore accounts. I heard the name of the cleaning lady, mentioned with a tone of voice that no one uses for staff. The deception was officially underway, but he was the one being deceived. Every time he told me I was forgetful, I memorized his tone. Every time he claimed a piece of jewelry was lost, I noted the date. I was a silent vault, collecting every scrap of evidence he dropped in his arrogance. He thought he was playing a game with a broken doll. He had no idea he was living with his own judge and jury. As the first week at home came to a close, I realized the amnesia wasn't just a shield, it was a mirror. Julian was showing me exactly who he was when he thought no one was looking. He was a man who saw a tragedy as an opportunity. He was a man who looked at a broken woman and saw a chance to perfect his control. I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, feeling the cold weight of his arm draped over me. He slept the sleep of the innocent, convinced that his secret was safe inside my empty head. But the slate wasn't blank. It was being filled with the blueprints of his own destruction. I was just waiting for the first major slip-up. I was waiting for the moment the predator got too comfortable in his cage. The trap was set. Now, I just had to wait for him to walk into it. The mask doesn't just slip, it rots off. It happens in the quiet moments when the predator finally stops fearing the prey. Julian had become so comfortable with my silence, so convinced of my mental vacancy, that he began to treat me like a piece of furniture, something that occupied space but lacked ears. It started on a Tuesday afternoon. The sunlight was streaming through the kitchen window, hitting the marble countertops where he was making coffee. I was seated on the sofa in the living room, positioned just so he could see my profile. I kept my gaze fixed on the television, which was playing a nature documentary on mute. I had perfected the 1,000-yard stare, the look of a woman who was physically present but spiritually miles away. I heard the familiar chime of his phone. Usually, he would step into the backyard or his home office for calls, but not today. He answered right there, leaning against the counter, just 10 feet away from me. Then, I heard it, a laugh. It wasn't the gentle, supportive chuckle he used when he was playing the devoted husband. This was a sharp, jagged sound of triumph. A sound I hadn't heard in years because it was reserved for the version of him that didn't need to hide. I know, he said into the phone, his voice dropping into a low, intimate conspiratorial tone. It's easier than I thought. She's just blank. The doctors say it's permanent enough for our purposes. The money is almost moved. Another week and the signature on the power of attorney won't even matter. Everything is falling into place. My blood didn't just run cold, it turned to ice in my veins. The money, our purposes. He wasn't just waiting for me to recover. He was actively draining the lifeblood of my future while I sat 10 feet away. I kept my eyes on the screen, watching a lioness stalk its prey on the silent TV, feeling a sick sense of irony. He ended the call and walked over to me. I felt the sofa dip as he sat down, and for a moment, I feared he could hear the frantic drumming of my heart. He reached out and stroked my hair, a gesture that once brought me peace but now felt like a spider crawling over my skin. Sarah, love, he whispered. I slowly turned my head, my eyes wide and searching, playing the part of the lost girl. I have something difficult to tell you. I know you've been asking why your sister hasn't visited. This was it, the moment where the lie became a masterpiece of cruelty. My sister, Elena, is my best friend. We had spoken for an hour the morning of my accident. She lives 2 states away and was likely frantic, probably blocked by Julian or told I was too fragile for visitors. Julian took a deep breath, his eyes filling with manufactured tears. I didn't want to tell you while you were so weak, but Elena passed away years ago, Sarah. It was a car accident. That's why you've been feeling that emptiness. I've been trying to protect you from the grief, but I think it's why your memory is struggling to return. Your mind is trying to shield you from the pain of her being gone. The sheer audacity of it almost broke me. He wasn't just stealing my money or my time, he was trying to kill my living family in my mind. He wanted to erase the only person who might come looking for me, the only person who knew the real Sarah. By killing her off, he was ensuring that I would never reach out, never wonder why she wasn't there, and never seek a life outside this house. It was a calculated attempt to isolate me into a psychological grave. I didn't blink. I let a single tear roll down my cheek, not for the lie of my sister's death, but for the death of any shred of humanity I thought Julian might still possess. I let out a small, broken whimper and leaned into him. He held me, whispering, "I'm here, I'm the only one left," and I realized that every kind gesture from him was now a physical weight, a shackle tightening around my wrists. Every meal he cooked, every pill he handed me, every time he tucked the blanket around my legs, it was all part of the burial. He wasn't just having an affair. This wasn't a simple case of a man losing interest and finding someone else. This was a predatory, financial, and emotional execution. He was waiting for the ink to dry on the last of the transfers. He was waiting for the moment he could legally discard the difficult wife and move on with the life he had built using my pieces. I watched him as he left the room to give me space to grieve. From my position on the sofa, I could see his reflection in the hallway mirror. The second he was out of my direct line of sight, the grief vanished from his face. He checked his watch, adjusted his tie, and began humming a tune. The betrayal was total. It was in the air I breathed and the water I drank. I realized then that I wasn't just faking amnesia to catch a cheater. I was faking it to survive a monster. If he knew for 1 second that I remembered Elena, that I remembered the password to the secondary account he hadn't found yet, I wouldn't just be forgetful. I would be a threat. And Julian had already shown how he handled threats. He erased them. I sat in the silence of the golden cage, the documentary on the TV finally ending, leaving me in a room full of shadows. My sister was alive. My money was being stolen. My husband was a ghost. But I was still here. Behind the blank eyes and the trembling hands, I was documenting every word, every laugh, and every lie. The re-education was over. I had learned everything I needed to know. Now, the observation phase was shifting into something much more dangerous. I was no longer just a witness, I was a hunter. He thought he was moving the money, but he was really just moving himself closer to the edge of a cliff. I stayed on that sofa for hours, mourning the woman I used to be, the one who believed in him. She was gone, but the woman who was left? She had a memory like a steel trap, and she was about to make him regret every word he ever spoke in this kitchen. This is the moment the floor drops out. There is a specific kind of horror in watching your own life being looted while you're still standing in the room. It happened on a Thursday morning. Julian didn't come to my bedside with breakfast. Instead, the front door opened, and I heard the clicking of heels, sharp, confident, and entirely too familiar. Julian walked into the living room, followed by a woman wearing a simple uniform. He introduced her as Claire, a new cleaning lady he'd hired to help out since I was incapacitated. I looked at her with the hollow, drifting gaze I had practiced for weeks. But inside, my heart was a hammer. I knew her. This was the crazy coworker he had spent months complaining about. The one he claimed was obsessed with him. The one he used as a shield to explain away his late nights and his nervous energy. I sat in my armchair, the amnesia fog acting as my only protection. I pretended not to recognize her face. I pretended not to know the scent of her perfume. A heavy, cloying jasmine that I had smelled on Julian's collars for the last 6 months. She looked at me, not with pity, but with a terrifyingly blank clinical curiosity, as if she were inspecting a piece of furniture that was about to be sold at auction. She really doesn't know? Claire whispered, her voice echoing in the hallway. She doesn't even know her own name unless I say it, Julian replied. His voice lacked any of the warmth he used when he spoke directly to me. It was cold, transactional, and triumphant. For the next 4 hours, I was a ghost in my own home. I sat by the window, staring at the garden, while they moved through the house like a pair of scavengers. They didn't even bother to lower their voices. Why would they? To them, I was a hard drive that had been wiped clean. I was a biological shell. I watched them in the reflection of the window glass while pointing at Julian my antique stood behind me, telling her how much they could get for it on the private market. I saw their fingers interlocked sat at the dining just inches from my dining table, and began to spread out a map of their future. It was a blueprint for my erasure. I listened as they discussed the facility. That was the word they used. Not a hospital, not a rehab center, but a long-term care facility, 3 states away. A place where people are sent to be forgotten. The paperwork for the involuntary commitment is almost ready, Julian said, his tone as casual as if he were discussing the weather. Once she's moved, the house goes on the market. We'll have the wire transfer from her inheritance cleared by the end of the month. By the time she realizes where she is, if she ever does, we'll be in Spain. Claire giggled. It was a high, shrill sound that sliced through the quiet of the house. You're so cruel, Julian. Telling her that her sister died? That was a masterstroke. She hasn't even tried to use the phone. It's not cruelty, it's efficiency, Julian replied. She was always so high maintenance, so difficult. This is just the universe balancing the scales. We're taking what we're owed for putting up with her for so long. The betrayal wasn't just the affair. It wasn't even the theft. It was the absolute joy they took in the dismantling of a human being. They weren't just moving on. They were celebrating the fact that they had successfully killed the idea of me without ever having to draw blood. They were laughing at my silence. They were mocking the blank slate I had become, never realizing that every word they spoke was being etched into my mind with the permanence of a tombstone. The chilling climax of the afternoon came when Julian walked over to the stereo. He put on our wedding song, the one we danced to in front of 300 people while we promised to cherish one another in sickness and in health. He took Claire in his arms and began to slow dance in the middle of the living room, right in front of my unblinking eyes. As they swayed, they started to laugh. It wasn't a joke, it was a celebration of my erasure. They laughed about how easy I was to trick. They laughed about the vitamins Julian was giving me that were actually just over-the-counter sedatives to keep me groggy. They laughed about the life they were going to build on the ruins of mine. I sat there, frozen, feeling the tension reach a breaking point. My muscles ached from the effort of staying still. My eyes burned from refusing to blink. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to stand up, to scream, to claw the smug smiles off their faces. But I didn't move. I waited. I realized in that moment that I had enough. I had the names of the accounts. I had the name of the facility. I had the confirmation of the gaslighting regarding my sister. I had the identity of the accomplice. The evidence was complete. The predator had grown so comfortable in his cage that he had left the door wide open. Julian stopped dancing and looked over at me, his expression one of mock sorrow. Poor Sarah, he said to Claire. She looks so peaceful, doesn't she? Like a doll that's worth $5 million, Claire added, leaning her head on his shoulder. They walked out of the room, heading toward the kitchen to open a bottle of wine, my favorite vintage, saved for an anniversary that would never come. I heard the pop of the cork and the clink of the glasses. I heard their toast to new beginnings. The room grew dark as the sun began to set, casting long, distorted shadows across the floor. The amnesia fog was gone, replaced by a clarity so sharp it felt like a blade. Julian thought he was sending me to a facility. He thought he was moving to Spain. He thought he had successfully deleted Sarah from the world. He was wrong. The memory was about to return with a vengeance. I wasn't a doll, and I wasn't a blank slate. I was the storm they never saw coming, and the forecast was about to change. I stood up, silently, and walked toward the bedroom to find my hidden phone. The game was over. The next time I spoke, it wouldn't be a question. It would be a sentence. Before I give you the final words that ended Julian's world, I need to know. Do you think you could stay silent while someone erased your life right in front of you? If you're finding the strength to trust your own intuition today, subscribe and join this community of survivors. We don't just tell stories here, we take our power back. One like on this video is a vote for the truth, no matter how much it hurts to hear. The time for observation was over. The air in the house felt heavy, like the atmosphere before a massive electrical storm. Julian had spent the evening packing a go bag for me, filled with clothes I hated, preparing for my transport to the facility the following morning. He moved with a jaunty, light step, the whistle on his breath sounding like a victory march. He walked into the bedroom, expecting to find the same shell of a woman he had been molding for weeks. He expected the vacant stare, the slight droop of the mouth, and the compliant silence of a broken doll. He didn't find her. I was standing by the window, my posture straight, my shoulders squared. I wasn't looking at the garden, I was looking at him. When he entered, he froze. The bag in his hand slipped an inch. He tried to summon the mask, his face twitching into that practiced look of grieving husband concern. "Sarah, honey, you should be resting. Come, let's get you back to bed." I didn't move, I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I simply looked him in the eye and spoke his full name, not the pet names he used to control me, but the name on his birth certificate. Julian Marcus Thorne. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard. It was the sound of 1,000 lies collapsing at once. The color drained from his face so fast it was as if a plug had been pulled at his feet. His eyes darted around the room, searching for the amnesia version of me, desperate to find the girl who didn't know her own sister was alive. But that girl was dead. I had buried her myself. "Your sister," he stammered, his voice cracking, the devotion finally dissolving into a desperate, violent scramble for excuses. "Sarah, you're confused. The trauma, it's making you hallucinate. You need your medicine." "I know Elena is alive, Julian," I said, my voice as cold and clear as a winter morning. "I know about the offshore account in the Cayman Islands. I know about the house in Spain. And I know that Claire isn't the cleaning lady." He took a step toward me, his hands shaking. For a second, I saw the predator's instinct to strike, to physically force the silence back onto me. But I held up my phone. The screen was glowing. "I've been recording for 72 hours, Julian. Every conversation, every laugh, every detail of your plan to commit me to a facility and steal my inheritance. It's already been uploaded to a cloud drive. My lawyer has it, Elena has it, the police have it." He stopped dead. The mask didn't just slip, it shattered into a million jagged pieces. He didn't apologize. He didn't beg for forgiveness. Instead, he snarled. He called me a vindicative BTCH. He told me I was nothing without him. He paced the room like a caged animal, throwing out accusations, trying to gaslight me one last time by claiming he did it all to save our future. It was pathetic. It was the frantic thrashing of a man who realized the cage door had swung shut on him instead. The aftermath was a blur of cold, hard reality. Within an hour, the blue and red lights of police cruisers were strobing against the lilies in the foyer. I watched from the porch as Julian was led away in handcuffs, his devoted face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. He didn't look like the man I married. He looked like a stranger I had accidentally let into my house 3 years ago. The next few days were a slow, painful reckoning. I changed the locks, not just on the doors, but on my life. I sat with detectives and went through the police reports, detailing the financial fraud and the psychological abuse. I called Elena. Hearing her voice, alive, vibrating with anger and relief, was the moment my heart finally began to beat again. But the hardest part wasn't the legal battle, it was the realization that the person I loved had never existed. Julian was a construct, a character played by a man who saw me as a target rather than a partner. I had to mourn a ghost while fighting a demon. Every corner of my house held a memory that turned out to be a trap. The golden cage was empty now, but the echoes of his laughter remained in the floorboards. I spent weeks cleaning the jasmine scent of Claire out of my upholstery. I spent months entangling the web of lies he had spun for our friends and my family. It was an exhausting, soul-crushing process of reclaiming my own narrative. But every time I felt like giving up, I remembered the silence of that hospital room. I remembered the power I felt when I chose to look through him. Now, I look at my life through a different lens. People ask me if I regret faking the amnesia. They ask if it was too extreme. My answer is always the same. When you are being hunted by a liar, the truth is your only weapon, and sometimes you have to hide it to sharpen it. I faked amnesia to find the truth, but I'm telling you this so you don't have to. You don't need a tragedy to see the reality of your relationship. You don't need a blank slate to see the red flags. They are there. They are in the way he dismisses your feelings. They are in the corrections he makes to your memories. They are in the silence between the lies. If your gut tells you something is wrong, it's because it is. Your intuition isn't paranoia, it's a survival mechanism. It's the voice of the woman you were meant to be, trying to protect the woman you are. Listen to it. I am no longer the girl in the house of flowers and lies. I am the woman who woke up. I am the witness. And I am finally, for the first time in my life, living a story that belongs entirely to me. Trust yourself, reclaim your narrative, and never, ever let someone else tell you who you are. Because once you know the truth, you can never go back to being a blank slate. You are the author now. I'm back in control of my life now, but there's one thing that still keeps me up at night. Out of everything Julian did, the money, the cleaning lady, the sister, which specific moment was the point of no return for you? At what exact point would you have broken your silence? Tell me in the comments. I'm reading every single one, and I'll be hearting the responses that show the most backbone.